This tells it like it is over there. Here, the difference is the battle line. Phil won a medal, and he came home for a long, hard ride ahead, with a friend's promise to keep and a friend's woman to take. Then he could start living for himself, if he was still alive. The Hard Ride is a motion picture of three loves: a man's love for a friend, a woman's love for a man, and their love of living. See The Hard Ride in color, rated GP.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hey there, welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we are chrome-wheeled, fuel-injected, and stepping out over the line with The Hard Ride from 1971.
The Hard Ride was produced by Charles Hanawalt for Burwalt Productions and was written and directed by Burt Topper.
The Hard Ride stars Robert Fuller as Phil, Sherry Bain as Sheryl, Tony Russell as Big Red, William Bonner as Grady, Marshall Reed as Father Tom, Michelangelo as Ralls, Biff Elliot as Mike, Al Cole as Mooch.
Also appearing are Phyllis Selznick as Rita, R.L. Armstrong as Jason, Robert Swan as Ted, Larry Eisley as Rice, Frank Charolla as Meyers, Herman Rudin as Little Horse, Ford Lile as Floyd, and Alfonso Williams as Lenny.
As the movie opens, we see 19 motorcycles approaching the camera across a dusty desert landscape as Swing Low, Sweet Chariot plays and the credits roll.
As we get closer to the bikes, we see there are nearly twice as many bikers because most of them are riding two-on-one.
Yep, most of them have their old lady on the back, but one biker has the character we'll find out is Lenny riding on the back.
But we don't have time to linger because we flash over to the war.
Already in progress.
Lenny has taken a hit.
He's on a stretcher carried by other soldiers who are taking him to get help. One of those soldiers is Phil. Lenny asks Phil to stay with him, and Phil promises he will.
But that doesn't seem reassuring to Lenny because Lenny loses consciousness at that moment. Then we flash to Phil escorting Lenny's coffin from a plane. So Lenny didn't make it. Phil is back in the States, and a sergeant is there to wish him good luck and to thank him for his service. Father Tom, who runs the local orphanage where Lenny grew up, is there to meet him.
And the next time we see them, they're in a hearse. Father Tom is driving, and Phil is sitting in the passenger seat. Father Tom tells Phil that Lenny was an orphan, and they're both his next of kin. Phil really wants to get home, so he asks when Lenny's funeral will be. It is the only reason he's there.
But Father Tom has other plans. He hands over a letter that had been written to Phil that had been found in Lenny's personal effects. Dear Phil, it reads, I hoped you never get to read this, but if you do, you've met Big Tom and you're probably getting ready to put me under the sod. He goes on to say that the money he's leaving to the orphanage and Phil should keep him going for a little while. But he also asks that Phil look after Baby, his chopper. Maybe Phil will fall in love with the bike the way that he did, and Phil can ride along with Big Red and the guys. That would be groovy. There's just one thing that I have to ask you, Phil. Aside from Tom and Phil, they're the only family he's got. So he asks that the guys he used to ride with, Big Red and the guys, all come to the funeral.
When the letter was being read, we got to see a bunch of flashbacks of Lenny's life, growing up in the orphanage. And these are just like flash frames. We don't really get a storyline here, but we see him growing up in the orphanage, going to war, and he also tells Phil to get in touch with Cheryl. Cheryl works at Mom's restaurant, and she can help find Red and the guys. And if Phil decides he doesn't want to keep Baby, he can leave her with Big Red.
Phil flashes back to the war and has promised not to leave Lenny's side.
At the funeral home, Father Tom asks the funeral director to postpone the funeral for a week, while Phil tracks down Big Red.
The funeral director says that will be fine. Phil is still waiting in the car when Father Tom returns. Tom tells Phil it's time for him to get acquainted with Baby, so Father Tom drives Phil to the garage where Baby is being stored. The mechanic, Ted, has just finished cleaning her up, getting her ready for her new owner. Father Tom asks if he's ever ridden before. A little, says Phil. His brother owned a dirt bike he used to ride once in a while.
Since Phil has never ridden a chopper before, Tom gives him a rundown on the turning radius and other mechanical details he needs to know.
He warns that it can get awfully squirrely on turns.
Ted tells Phil that Lenny was the only one of them, meaning black person, that he ever took to. And since Father Tom has an appointment, he leaves. Ted helps Phil get the bike started, and then Phil takes Baby for a spin for the first time.
While the song Fallen in Love with Baby by Junction plays.
During this montage, Baby gets a lot of close-ups.
Phil pulls up to Mom's restaurant, and Cheryl is standing out front, and she stares blankly at Baby as Phil rides up. Something the matter, miss? He asks. Where'd you get that bike? Asks Cheryl. Belonged to a friend of mine. Cheryl quietly goes inside. Phil looks back at his new bike and then follows her inside and sits at the counter. He's expecting Cheryl to take his order, but she won't even look at him.
Cheryl's boss, Mike, comes out and asks her what's wrong. He takes Phil's order while Cheryl composes herself. He goes to make Phil his ham and cheese sandwich and asks Cheryl to get Phil some coffee.
When she gives Phil his coffee, he asks, "Is your name Sheryl?" "That's right," she says.
Even though no one else pronounces it that way or ever will. It's Cheryl.
Phil explains that he and Lenny were in the same outfit together, and he talked about her all the time.
Cheryl bitterly comments that they shared everything, huh? Don't think she likes being talked about.
Outside, a couple of bikers ride up and they recognize Lenny's bike. This is Ralls and Mooch. They wonder why the bike is there, and Mooch admits that he's always kind of wanted this one for himself.
They seem kind of angry that Lenny might have given the bike to Cheryl. So they go inside. Mooch and Ralls greet Cheryl by name and tell her that they see that she has her old dude's bike out front. They order their drinks, and then Ralls asks her to take him for a ride, if you know what he means, and she does.
It's his bike, she says, motioning at Phil. Ralls asks if Lenny lost the bike in a crap game. Phil says Lenny left it to him, if it's any of his business. Ralls asks if Phil might be interested in selling it, but Phil says he thinks he's going to keep it for a while. Then Phil asks if they know a fellow named Big Red. Ralls asks if he's ever seen the Indian. Now Phil knows why he's called Big Red, but no, he hasn't seen him.
Phil offers them $10 to take him to Big Red, but they said they'll do it for free. Cheryl side-eyes the pairs as they negotiate with Phil. They say they'll take him to Big Red now, so Phil settles his tab and goes. Mike, Cheryl's boss, says that louse never turned down $10 in his life. Uh-oh.
So Phil rides off following Ralls and Mooch to the strains of Be Nobody's Fool by Blue Water. They're soon joined by a few more bikers, and they go to kind of a biker camp or haven or something. And there's a bus.
Yeah, there's a bus. It's like the scene we saw at the very open. There's this giant expanse of flat desert that they're riding across, all side by side. So they take up almost the entire empty space, and they kick up a lot of dust.
Grady, who seems to be the leader of this group, watches the bikers as they ride up, and Mooch runs ahead to tell Grady that they're bringing a guy who's looking for Big Red. Grady wants to know what that's got to do with him. He's riding Lenny's bike, says Mooch.
Just want to point out here that Grady is shirtless, and he dribbles his Schlitz when he drinks. It's really gross.
From their bikes, Ralls tells Phil that that's Big Red over there. An Indian with a beard, huh? Phil says suspiciously. Ralls sends Phil over to talk to him because he's not going to be coming to him. So Phil goes over and tells Grady that Lenny asked that Big Red take care of Baby. Who's Baby? Asks Grady. Bet he means Cheryl, says Mooch. Phil turns and starts to walk away.
He's figured out that this may not be Big Red.
They ask where he's going, and Phil says, to find Big Red.
But they're not going to let him go. They jump him, and Grady pulls a knife. They rifle through his pockets and find the bike's pink slip. Two girls tell Grady not to cut off anything they can use. Grady waggles his knife at Phil, suggesting that he might do just that. But all he wants is the bike.
If Phil were to just sign it over to him, it would make things a lot easier. Phil says okay, but then remembers his military training and gets the knife away from Grady and holds it to him.
He uses Grady as a hostage to get away from the others. He puts Grady on the front of his bike and climbs in behind him, holding the knife at his side. Mooch says they should have jumped him, but Ralls points out all the campaign ribbons that Phil is wearing, indicating that he didn't get those for not fighting, although he used a slur to express that same thought, and I'm not going to do that. After Grady threatens to retaliate against him, Phil leaves him stranded in the middle of the empty desert plain.
Then Phil returns to Mom's. At Phil's request, Mike makes a call to Cheryl.
Mike explains to Cheryl that Phil had just gotten beaten up and promises to send him over to her. Mike asks why Phil needs to see Cheryl. To find Big Red, says Phil. Mike asks, didn't Mooch and Ralls just take him to see Big Red? Phil explains the Grady bait and switch. Mike knows Grady and how much trouble he is. He tells Phil that wherever Lenny is, he wouldn't mind if Phil just went to the funeral and then got back to his own life.
Then we cut away to Grady, Ralls, Mooch, and the others, all riding towards town, while the Hard Ride by the Sounds of Harley plays on the soundtrack.
And believe me, the entire song plays. This is a very long montage.
They eventually make their way to Mom's restaurant, just as Mike is in his truck and ready to pull out and leave. Grady walks up to the truck and asks Mike where he's going. Mike says he's going home. He's closed and he has a wife and kid waiting for him at home. Grady says it's foolish for Mike to turn away all this business, and he should open back up for them.
They're only going to be there for a couple hours.
And they won't give him any trouble. But Mike knows that what they mean is, if he doesn't open up, there'll be trouble.
Absolutely. So they all go inside and debauchery ensues. Beers are poured, bikers dance with bikers, orders for food are placed, and no one pays for anything.
Grady sends a group of them over to the orphanage to look for the bike. He thinks that's where they might find it, and if they do find it, he wants them to let the air out of the tires. That'll show them.
Well, if they let the air out of the tires, then the bike can't go. And it'll be much easier to claim for themselves.
So they leave, and now Mike is stuck with a bunch of cooking burgers and no one to serve them to.
And nobody paid for anything, like I said. Now we see that Phil is at Cheryl's. She also counsels him to just go. Let Father Tom bury Lenny and get out of here. Phil's kind of stubborn, though, so that's not going to happen.
Phil says he's got to finish what he started. Then there's a sound of bikes outside. It's Ralls and Mooch. Cheryl looks out the window and asks what they want. Ralls asks if she'd like to go for a ride. Cheryl says no thanks, she has to get up early tomorrow. She closes the window, and Mooch asks Ralls why does he bother with her. But Ralls is sure he's starting to wear her down.
Ralls says that he's seen Cheryl high and that he's going to get there eventually. Yuck. Then they drive off. Inside, Phil questions Cheryl's relationship with Ralls. I haven't slept with him, if that's what you're asking, she declares.
Then Cheryl tells Phil that there are some sleeping bags and blankets in the closet, and not to worry, she's had them cleaned. I'm sure you have, says Phil. He follows her into the kitchen and asks if she can at least name a few places where he might find Big Red. She again tells him that he should just give it up. It's not doing Lenny any good. He doesn't need it, and neither does she.
She leaves him to get set up on the couch, and then comes back with an alarm clock already set to 5 a.m. so he can get out of there early. She sees him holding the bedsheet and says she washed the native smell out of it. This angers Phil. He says he knows the difference between black and white. Sure, Lenny stank when he sweat, but everyone does. Cheryl looks down where he has grabbed her arm and says that he's hurting her, so he lets her go.
Next morning, Phil and Cheryl leave early on Baby. With their sleeping bags strapped to the back, they ride through the day while Where Am I Going Today by Bob Moline plays.
This is another long motorcycle montage. Cheryl gives Phil some glasses to keep the dust out of his eyes. And then they ride over to Bronson Canyon, where Cheryl recounts how she and Lenny spent 3 days there once. Cheryl's standing in a cave and Phil's at the entrance with the light behind him. She turns around and gets a glimpse of him in Lenny's jacket and has a momentary shock because he kind of looks like Lenny for a second dressed like that.
Phil asks her what's wrong, and Cheryl says that she brought some sandwiches. So while eating sandwiches, Cheryl explores the canyon's echo function. She shouts, "Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?"
And for some reason, this reminds Phil of how he first met Lenny. Phil had taken a drink from Lenny's canteen, which was shocking to Lenny. Phil told him that he was thirsty and his canteen was empty. Does this story have a point? Asked Cheryl. Phil says that he's the last person in the world who would judge her for digging Lenny. And he doesn't like being accused of something he's not guilty of.
He's not a bigot, is how he sums this up. Cheryl assumed he was, and Phil is trying to prove in a roundabout way that he's not. So they make peace and eat more sandwiches. And then we get more riding. There's more cool scenery. I do have to say that this is a great travelogue movie. We see Yosemite, we see the Sierra Mountains, we see it all over California and some of Arizona, and we spend a lot of time seeing it. So it's good that the scenery is so beautiful. Oh, and Let the Music Play by Blue Water plays while they're riding.
Next stop is a bar called The Orgy. Cheryl sees from his bike that Al is working there today. A drunk man is talking to Al at the bar when Phil and Cheryl come in.
Apparently he hates his wife.
Al excuses himself and goes over to talk to Cheryl, and she introduces Phil. Al expresses his condolences for Lenny, and Cheryl asks Al if he knows where they can find Big Red, and Al says he was just there last night and he's heading over to Downey to get his bike fixed.
Al has to go back to the grouchy customer, who starts crabbing about the war in Vietnam and how he'd kill his son before he let him go over there. It'd be the same result either way. And then he recommends building concentration camps like the commies do instead.
This hits Cheryl a little hard, and she has to excuse herself. Phil pays and joins her outside.
Cheryl says that she just had to go, man. And then Phil backhandedly accuses Cheryl of having a thing with Al. He's kind of a one-note guy when it comes to Cheryl's relationships. Then they ride on.
While riding, Phil asks why they don't just make some phone calls instead of riding all over the state. Cheryl says that she thought he'd enjoy this, and besides, the people they're looking for don't take calls.
Who else would be looking for them besides the cops, she says.
They stop by a mountain overlooking a stream. It's another place that she and Lenny used to hang out.
Phil puts the moves on Cheryl. She tells him, "Don't turn me on unless I'm what you want." And that stops Phil's amorous advances.
No, he's a little floored.
Yeah, he's kind of shocked that she would say that.
In the next scene, Cheryl is laying on the ground, smoking a joint, and Phil comes up with some beers.
Schlitz. It's always Schlitz.
Cheryl says she doesn't need one right now, but she'll take one if Phil will take a hit of her weed. She heard that everybody in Vietnam smoked.
Phil says, well, it was there if you wanted, meaning that he didn't want it. Phil wonders if Grady is still looking for him. Cheryl giggles. Not up there, he's not. Big Red had told Grady that if he ever caught him within 20 miles of Victorville, he'd kill him, and he meant it too.
Then she asks Phil why he's staring at her. "I really don't know," he says. Cheryl says that every biker wants her bod, and she won't let any dude put her down for anything she's done. She playfully bites his arm and says, "If you want me, baby, you take the whole package or nothing." Then she stands and starts to undress while the soundtrack plays Carry Me Home by Thelma Camacho.
She strips off her outer layers and goes for a dip in the river in her undies. Phil opts to join her, and then they make out in the water. We don't see how far that goes because now we're back on the road.
But we're not moving because they've been pulled over.
By Fabian.
Officer Fabian has stopped them on the road.
It's a uncredited cameo by Fabian Forte. Cheryl's suspicious, but Fabian just wants to admire Phil's chopper. You see, he's building one of his own, and he asks where Phil got his custom work done. Phil tells him that it was in Victorville, and Fabian doesn't know of any shops in Victorville, so Phil says it was just some friends of his.
Officer Fabian thanks him and returns to his car. Cheryl can't believe that this conversation just took place because things like this just don't happen.
Yeah, she didn't get hassled by the man this time, but she may not realize that Phil is white, and that makes a difference.
So they ride on, while I Came a Long Way to Be With You by Thelma Camacho plays.
Is this a jukebox musical? It's pretty close. It's just a bunch of music videos with some action in between. However, the bike is stalled and Phil can't start it. Cheryl seems delighted. Now they can have a picnic.
Picnic? Are you sure you didn't plan this? Cheryl smiles and pulls him by the arm. She takes him up the hill, where they lay down a blanket and start to make out, when 4 kids pull up in a car by the chopper. These kids know that where there's a chopper, there's weed. They start ransacking the bike, but they're making so much noise that Phil and Cheryl are alerted, and they return to the bike.
The kids say they're looking for weed, and Cheryl and Phil protest that they don't have any. But one of the kids pulls a knife, so Cheryl gives up her stash. Then the one with the knife grabs Cheryl and demands some uppers, while the other 3 start beating up on Phil.
Cheryl screams, "Don't hurt him. I'll give you anything you want." What they want is more weed, but Cheryl says they've already taken all of their stash. So she starts unbuttoning her shirt.
One of the kids seems interested in what Cheryl could be offering here, while one of the others objects to actually raping a woman.
But they don't have time to argue about this because a truck is coming down the road, and the kids split. Cheryl buttons up and goes to help Phil.
Phil comes to and wonders how Cheryl got them to leave. Well, she didn't really. The truck driver did. He pulls up and asks if Phil and Cheryl are okay, and they say they are. So he leaves.
So now Phil wonders what they're going to do now. The bike still won't start. Do they have to start pushing? But Cheryl confesses that there's a reserve tank on the bike. She was trying to be cute, but that cuteness almost got them killed.
Phil forgives her, and then they get on the bike and head off to Downey. They arrive at a bike shop, and Phil and Cheryl come in looking for Big Red.
Bernie at the bike shop says that Red was there this morning, but he's gone now.
Bernie asks if Cheryl and Red have split up. Cheryl says, yeah, a couple of months ago, and Phil gives her a look.
Cheryl notices a poster promoting motorcycle racing at Dead Man's Point on the wall. Could be there, she says.
So we go to the cycle races already in progress. And we watch a little bit of it.
Cheryl finds a few acquaintances there, introduces Phil, and asks about Red. This is Floyd and Benny and a third guy who does most of the talking but never introduces himself. He says that Red left early and is probably at the river by now. Cheryl says cool, she'll see them up there. They ask her to stick around and maybe they can all cruise up together, but Cheryl says they've got to get going.
After Cheryl and Phil leave, the guy who never introduced himself knows that Lenny died in Nam. So that means that Big Red must know too? Floyd, who seems a little interested in what's going on, heads out now. Perhaps to go find Red and warn him?
Phil and Cheryl make a stop by the river. Cheryl has something on her mind. She tells Phil that she and Lenny grew up together. Before she passed, her mother had owned Mom's restaurant, and Lenny was hired there to wash the dishes. And since Cheryl was always around, then the two of them just kind of fell in love.
She says, we fell in love or something.
And now she says she doesn't want to be hung up on anyone, and she says that she used to go with Red. Phil asks why she and Red aren't still together, and she explains that after a few months, he told her that she had to turn on anybody that wanted her.
At this, Phil gets offended and storms off, and she follows. She explains that she left one night, but he barks at her to shut up. They're just getting Red for the funeral, and if Red still wants her, that's her problem. What a jerk.
That isn't why I told you, she says.
But he's not interested. Now we see Floyd, who we met at the races. He's at Big Red's camp by the river. He goes over to find Red's dad, Little Horse. He asks where Red could be. Little Horse tells Floyd that Red is in town with the horrors as per usual. A little while later, Phil and Cheryl arrive with the same question.
Cheryl is warmly greeted by Little Horse. Floyd tells them that Red is at Shannon's. What's Shannon's? Asks Phil. It's a whorehouse, man. You don't want to take her there. Floyd says he can dig up somebody to ride with Phil into town, and Cheryl can stay there.
Once Phil and his escort Meyers are gone, Cheryl sits on a dock by the water. Floyd comes over and gloms onto her, under the assumption that she'll sleep with any black guy. She's fighting him off as Little Horse comes up to order Floyd to leave her alone and to get off his property.
It's night when Phil and Meyers finally ride into town.
I thought town would be just a few minutes away, but apparently it's in the next county.
Big Red is in bed with a blonde, but he gets up when he hears bikes ride up outside. Hey, you want to see some choppers? He asks. What do I want to see choppers for? Asks the blonde. Because I'm telling you to, says Red. Then Red calls out to the new arrivals. Phil says he was with Lenny and Nam. What's that got to do with me? Asks Red. Phil says he just needs to speak with him about the scooter. Red turns to the blonde and says he might have just gotten himself a new bike.
And he invites Phil up. He and Meyers go inside, where Meyers explains what his money could buy. A very sad lot of tired-looking whores. Meyers decides to partake of a whore, but Phil heads straight up to Red's room.
The blonde immediately introduces herself. I'm Vera. Red asks where Phil got the chopper, and Phil explains that Lenny left it to him.
For the umpteenth time.
Then he says Lenny wanted Red to come to his funeral. Red says he's not going to his funeral. They weren't friends. The only reason he kept her around was for his bike and his woman.
He asks if Phil will sell him the bike. Phil offers to give it to him at Lenny's funeral, if he brings his whole unwashed posse for the occasion. Groovy, says Red. They'll leave in the morning.
The next day, Phil, Red, and Meyers return to the camp. Little Horse wakes Cheryl to let her know that they've arrived.
Her two lovers are there. Red makes a beeline for Cheryl and drags her off. Little Horse says sometimes he curses the day his kid was born.
Phil calls out to Red to let her go. Punches are thrown, and Phil has flashbacks, and sounds of artillery are heard.
This is the most awkward fight. They do it in slow motion. It honestly looks like a real fight with no sound effects or anything, just because it's so unstaged looking, where they're really grappling with each other and they're not really connecting, and it's just this sort of slow, sad fight with the noise of choppers and machine guns being fired in the background. It's just so weird. And everyone's standing around watching this pathetic display.
It goes on for a while, but eventually they both collapse exhausted. Red realizes that Phil is ex-military and declares that no girl on Earth is worth the hassle. So now they can be friends. Reluctantly.
I don't know if they're friends, but maybe they're just not enemies anymore. So they're all headed to the funeral, but they have to make a stop at the gas station. At the pumps, Red gives Phil a veiled threat about what he'd do if Phil changed his mind about giving him the bike. So Phil gives him the pink slip on the spot, but says he needs to keep the bike for a couple more days.
As they're riding, Cheryl, sitting behind Phil, asks why he gave Red the pink slip. Don't hassle me, that's the way I want it, okay?
It's the only way to get him to the funeral, he says.
Cheryl says she wouldn't have given him the satisfaction. They ride until nightfall, then camp out.
Cheryl apologizes for what happened back at the camp, and Phil relents and decides to sleep with her. I don't know what she was apologizing for. I think he was more in the wrong than she was. He did say he was going to take her just as she was. The next morning, Phil has to rev up his bike to wake up Red. He tells Red that they can read at Mom's. He has to make a phone call, and Red agrees.
So Phil and Cheryl make the long ride back to Mom's.
And we watch every minute of it.
When they arrive, they go in, and Cheryl has to apologize to Mike for not calling off the last few days. She goes back to make breakfast while Phil makes that phone call to Father Tom to let him know that it's all been arranged and he can proceed with Lenny's funeral.
Mike tells Phil that he better not stay there too long, and he's right. Mooch, Ralls, and the others had apparently gotten up early to find them. They see the bike, stop, and come inside.
They go in and threaten Cheryl with a knife. She warns them that Red is due any minute. So they change tactics and get Phil to ride with them back to see Grady.
Ralls is riding behind Phil, and they leave Cheryl behind.
Cheryl watches them go, then runs in to call the police. But Mike grabs the phone and stops her. They said they'd bring the place down if anyone ever called them in.
Cheryl curses out Mike and then runs into the street.
And just then, Red and his gang ride up, so Cheryl runs out and tells them that they took Phil.
Cheryl shrieks hysterically at Red. Red slaps her and tells her to get on the bike, and they ride off to save Phil and Baby. Mostly Baby. And then a song that I believe is called Another Kind of War plays as Red's gang and Cheryl approach Grady's camp.
So Phil has already been taken to Grady's bike haven. When they see the other bikers coming, Grady tells his men to hide Phil on the bike. Then he commands that everyone take a man and stay with him.
Grady tells his men to play a man-on-man defense, and the chicks have to do it too, as Red parks and the two leaders have a confab.
Where's the dude in the bike? Asks Red. You're not taking him, Red, if that's what you're thinking, Grady says. Red says that he figures that they want the dude more than the bike, so if they give Red the bike, they'll go, and that'll be that. Cheryl protests, but Red tells her to shut up. And there's one more thing. Lenny signed the bike over to the dude, and he's got to sign it over to Red. So Grady tells Mooch to go get the dude. And a pen, says Red. They bring Phil out. He and Red share a look. Then Red punches Grady in the face.
The fight begins, and whimsical music plays as they battle in the dirt.
And one guy even blows up a car.
One of their own cars. I don't know what the point of that was. But the fighting continues.
That is until Mooch comes out of the bus. He got tired of looking for the pen, and he found a shotgun instead, which he lifts up and fires.
And then we cut to a funeral. Red's gang and Sheryl are all there. There's a 21-gun salute. Father Tom reads from the Bible as if he's never seen one before.
As he's speaking, the camera pulls back to reveal 2 caskets, both with American flags draped over them.
Wow, it's the M. Night Shyamalan twist ending that we weren't expecting. So yep, Phil got killed in that fight.
And then we hear once again the sound of Lenny saying, "Don't leave me." And Phil replying, "I'm right here, Lenny. I'm not leaving you." And Bill Medley sings "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" once again to take us out.
What a senseless waste of human life, or at least an hour and a half of my life. And that's the end. Hey, we're back talking about The Hard Ride from 1971.
One of the working titles for The Hard Ride was Bury an Angel, according to an article published in the LA Times in April of 1970, which also stated that Robert Fuller had signed a 3-picture deal with Burwalt Productions.
Carry Me Home, Brother was another title used in pre-production. The film's new title, The Hard Ride, was announced via an Associated Press article published in mid-April 1971.
Filming began on April 14, 1970, and took place in various locations in the southwest United States, including Yosemite National Park, the Sierra Mountains, Bronson Canyon, and on the border between California and Arizona near the Colorado River.
The Hard Ride was Sherry Bain's film debut, and Burwalt Productions' only release.
At a luncheon in Houston, where Robert Fuller was the guest speaker promoting the upcoming release of The Hard Ride, he said that he found it easy to switch from riding a horse, which he did for his roles in television shows like Wagon Train and Laramie, to a dirt bike, which he rides for fun around the hills, woods, and beaches of Southern California. Fuller said the bike, which was called Baby, was built especially for the picture, and its front wheel is extended 24 inches. The back is extended 6. Fuller said bikers turned out in droves in Victorville, not just to watch the movie being shot, but to see those bikes in action.
The soundtrack, containing songs written by Harley Hatcher, was released on Paramount Records in 1971. That soundtrack also included the rendition of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, sung by Bill Medley.
Oh, sure, they played it twice. After receiving a plaque for the International Film Importers and Distributors of America, James H. Nicholson and Samuel Ziarkov of AIP told those assembled that the studio asked their directors and producers to only make G or GP movies from now on, with the caveat that they meant whenever possible. Arkoff and Nicholson said they had already received GP ratings for The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant, The House That Screamed, and The Hard Ride. Arkoff and Nicholson said most movies released as ours could have had objectionable material deleted without hurting the story, and said that, to them, GP stood for Good Profits, saying their decision was done at the behest of exhibitors who had contacted them asking for more family-friendly fare.
In an article headlined, Shock Cycle Films Paid Way for AIP's Wuthering Heights, written by Barbara Wilson and published in the Philadelphia Inquirer shortly before the release of The Hard Ride, James H. Nicholson explained his rationale for producing movies like the Emily Bronte classic, which were not exactly on brand for American International, but then said that the studio would still be releasing movies like The Hard Ride and Blood and Lace, ostensibly to pay for them.
The Hard Ride was released in late April of 1971, allegedly on a double bill with Pacific Vibrations, but more often the movie was paired with a biker movie like Angel Unchained, Born Losers, or Cycle Savages, or even The Miniskirt Mob.
The film's world premiere took place at the Skyview Theater in Arkansas on April 21, 1971, according to an ad published in the Jonesboro Sun on that date. The theater was showing The Hard Ride and A Bullet for Pretty Boy as the second feature, and said all motorcycle and motorbike riders would be admitted for no charge that Wednesday and the next day, but also said that they had to leave their bikes parked at the box office. So this was probably a drive-in. Another article that we found put the premiere at the Center Theater in Little Rock on April 21st. However, a lot of theaters were showing it on April 21st, so world premiere, I don't think that was strictly true.
Robert Fuller made another appearance to promote the release of The Hard Ride, this time in El Paso, Texas, where he said that he believed movies are on the upgrade after several years of degradation. He said he won't appear in X-rated films because they are not good for children and have resulted in degradation. The Hard Ride was the first GP-rated motorcycle film, and Fuller said it bears no similarity to the other bike films in which emphasis had been on violence and frequently pointlessness. Fuller, a Korean War veteran, said he supported the U.S. position in Vietnam because he is an American.
Okay. Box Office Magazine advised theater owners to put a chrome motorcycle in the lobby and to use the soundtrack album to promote the film. Taglines for The Hard Ride include, "Some machines are too hot for any man to handle."
A big chrome baby and a black leather doll, both hotter, faster, tougher than most men can handle.
He came home for love and peace and found another kind of war.
The massacre machine. The one man who could ride it was dead. Now it was up for grabs, and so was she. For anyone who could handle both.
They gave him a medal and sent him home for the long, hard ride ahead, with a friend's promise to keep, a friend's enemy to kill, and a friend's woman to take. Then he could start living for himself, if he was still alive.
Ted Mahar of The Oregonian wrote in his review of The Hard Ride, "Many a theatergoer passes up movies like The Hard Ride and similar motorcycle movies because they feel the movies are likely to be violent, sexual, crude, and juvenile. Well, they're right, of course, but they would probably be surprised at the open appeal to sentimentality these movies offer. In their way, they are as corny and sloppy as Love Story. You might call it hard mush. With 4 and 5 sunsets a day, the rock music and the sentimental dialogue and storyline, the whole thing begins to look like some kind of new, hardline Hallmark greeting card."
4 and 5 sunsets a day. Kevin Thomas of the LA Times wrote, "The Hard Ride is about as fine an exploitation film as one could wish, and lots truly more artistic than many of the so-called personal films. Writer-director Burt Topper has not only supplied all the slam-bang excitement expected of a biker movie, and without gratuitous violence besides, but has also come through with a singularly uncompromising depiction of contemporary life, in which it is possible to recognize a great deal of bitter truth." He praised Bain's performance, saying that the film belonged to her. Miss Baines is convincingly tough yet sweet in her vivid characterization of a complex woman.
Ed Swinney of the Houston Post wrote, "As motorcycle movies go, The Hard Ride charges out a little ahead of the pack. It has a story you can follow, fine editing, a solid soft rock score, and beautiful photography, which is both a strength and a weakness." He calls the movie a travelogue of sorts, as seen from motorcycle level, but the story, which started strongly, begins to sag. The credibility takes a tumble when the bike gang leader, though rough and tough, turns out to dress like he stepped out of Gentleman's Quarterly Spring Sports Clothes preview section. Everybody else looks like there's a soap strike, a ban on bathing and razors.
Tony Mastroianni in the Cleveland Press stated, "The Hard Ride was the first of the motorcycle gang movies released after American International, the releasing company, announced a policy of no more R or X-rated films. This one carries a GP rating. All ages, parental guidance suggested. There's still plenty of violence, mayhem, and sex. The only difference between this movie and its predecessors are that it doesn't allow the sadistic scenes to run as long, and the hero and heroine go swimming in their underwear instead of in the buff. A loud folk rock soundtrack competes with the roar of motorcycles for attention."
The Hard Ride received an A3, meaning morally unobjectionable, rating from the Catholic League of Decency.
I'm glad nobody's morals were offended. All right, these were all good reviews, basically good reviews. Do you also have glowing words for The Hard Ride?
I think there's a lot to like in this movie, aside from the story, which is kind of meh. It's got a decent soundtrack. None of the songs are that striking, but they're still catchy. And when you're watching the scenery of California and they're riding along, it just gives you good 70s breezy feel vibes.
It's got that light FM or even AM 70s feel to it. Yeah, I think if the movie had just been those scenes, them driving around on the motorcycles, listening to the music, I would have still enjoyed it.
Well, that is half of the movie.
It is half of the movie. This movie's an hour and a half. And every time we mention there's a song playing, we listen to the whole song. So they're doing some extreme padding here. But it's so beautiful and the songs are fine, so you don't really mind. And we get a chance to catch up our notes without anything else going on.
Yeah, I think this might be one of the better AIP soundtrack albums that I've heard.
It was released on Paramount, so maybe AIP didn't believe in the music.
Or sometimes that's because an artist might be signed to that label. So we don't know the politics behind this particular album.
True. So let's talk about the story. To me, and I made a little comment at the end of our summary, this was such a pointless effort on Phil's part. Everything he did got him killed. He didn't gain anything by this, and he ignored a lot of good advice to just have the funeral and go home.
Yeah, he was kind of stubborn.
You know, he made a promise to his military buddy, and I understand. You can't let them down. Death doesn't change that. But still, we don't know what he didn't go home to. What about his parents? What about his family? Maybe he was married. Maybe he had kids. He never mentioned it. But nobody came to that funeral for Phil besides Sheryl. He had to know somebody.
I think that maybe he didn't have anybody, because I think that might be why he was so dedicated to carrying on this mission. I think if he had a wife waiting for him, he would have taken that into account and maybe changed his plan a little.
He probably wouldn't have slept with Sheryl, but then again, it's the 70s. Who knows?
I don't know if there's a lot of films from this era that talked about people coming back from the war, at least that particular war.
Yeah, that seems to be more a function of the later 70s, where they're looking back at the aftermath of the Vietnam War. And here it's still in progress.
Right. You hear about people being killed overseas, but you don't see them coming back.
No, and we didn't spend a lot of time in Vietnam, with finger quotes, during the war, but we got a flash of it, so we know how harrowing it was. Phil's flashbacks and the little bit that we did see. We saw the scene where Lenny got hit. It's a flashback, not at the beginning of the movie, but Phil flashes back to it. And it's pretty bad. Although it doesn't look anything like the jungles of Vietnam, it looks like the rest of the movie looks scenery-wise.
Burt Topper, who directed this, did a lot of war movies. He did several for AIP, but he also did Diary of a High School Bride.
Those were early movies for AIP, weren't they?
Yeah, back in the late 50s. But he was involved with them throughout the 60s. And this is kind of a biker movie, but he still had to throw the war in that because that's his thing. He was a war veteran himself.
Well, it makes sense. The people who did like this movie, I imagine that's what made it more important and more meaningful to them. Because it didn't just deal with a bunch of dirtbag bikers fighting over a motorcycle or a chick, which we have seen before in Hell's Bells. It was about two friends and one friend honoring his commitment to his dead friend. And with the war being involved, it made it very topical, because it came out, like you said, during the war, not long after. So when one reviewer said it was more personal than some so-called personal films, I think that's what they meant.
Yeah, and it did seem to go out of its way to show racial tensions as they were at this time in history, which plays pretty mild when you look at it in 2025.
Yeah, but I don't think we spent a lot of time discussing who was what race in this movie. But, Big Red and Little Horse were Native American. Lenny and Floyd were black. Everyone else was white. But yeah, it's mostly seen in Cheryl and Phil's relationship, where Cheryl is expecting everyone to be racist towards her because she was with Lenny. And
well, it's something she's obviously experienced.
Yeah,
so she has come to expect that.
And that's why Floyd put the moves on her, because she'd already been with one black guy. So he figured that he didn't even have to ask. He could just take Lenny's place. But yeah, she was expecting the worst from Phil. And he was trying very hard to show her that he wasn't going to be that bad guy. To him, Lenny was a brother.
He was trying a little too hard.
Yeah. Well, there was nothing natural about Robert Fuller's performance as Phil. He was just grouchy, and he just seemed grouchy for everything. In every occasion, just made him grouchier. He didn't really have many other emotions to display.
Well, he did experience some PTSD before anybody knew what that was.
True. Yeah.
And that was actually portrayed in the film.
Yeah.
During the fight scenes and when he had the flashbacks.
Mm-hmm. So I wasn't super surprised that he got killed in the end, but we didn't see it happen. So it was that crane shot with the reveal that there's two coffins. That must have been surprising for a lot of people.
I don't know how surprising it is once you get to the funeral and they're showing everybody standing there and they don't show Phil.
Yeah, but maybe he's...
So by the time they actually pan back and show his two coffins, you're like, well, yeah.
I think it was meant to be a surprise, whether people were surprised or not.
Oh, it was meant to be. I just don't know if they accomplished that.
I wonder if anyone went to jail for that.
Despite all the grungy towns and the unwashed bikers, this is really kind of a beautiful movie with all the travelogue stuff.
Yeah, it is. I absolutely loved looking at the scenery. We live kind of around this. I mean, we drive between Arizona and California all the time, and I can never get over how lovely it is just driving out there. Even the parts that are mostly scrub and there's mountains in the distance, it's still beautiful, and I love this area of the country. And I've never been to Yosemite, but now I definitely want to go. They spend a lot of time there, and it's gorgeous. And like I said, if it was just a travelogue with the music playing and Phil and Sheryl on their bike riding around this beautiful area of the country, I'd still be happy to watch it. I guess at the end, though, it just kind of hit me how dumb life is. That these kind of things really do happen. You're trying to help your friend and it gets you killed and you have nothing to show for it. But that happens a lot, and it's sad, but it's real.
I don't know if that's necessarily the takeaway that this film is trying to make. I think it's more about living in the moment, because this movie isn't about falling in love with Baby. When Phil's riding that bike, he's falling in love with the freedom that Baby can deliver.
He's definitely not falling in love with Cheryl because he's a real ass to her.
No, Cheryl's complicit in the whole thing because she's making him go on this journey.
He made her go on this journey. She didn't want to go.
She's taking him to all the places where she and Lenny used to go. She's not taking him to find Big Red immediately.
Not immediately, but yeah, she's enjoying that part of it. But I think she could have gone home happily afterwards, but he had to find Big Red. She didn't want to find him. She had trouble with him. They didn't end on good terms. He was pimping her out. So I think she would have been happy just to get the bike and ride on it herself without Phil, without Big Red, without anybody. Probably would have been happy to decenter men from her life.
That is an intimidating looking bike.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like the quote we saw from Robert Fuller that was custom made with the wheel extending 2 feet out from the chassis in front. And I don't think I could ever have ridden that. It looks dangerous. It was dangerous. Every time they parked it somewhere, some dumbass finds it and wants to kill whoever the owner is and take it away. I don't know why I didn't learn to park it in the back.
Lenny apparently never had this problem.
No, I guess not. But he was with Big Red. He was part of their gang, so I guess he had that protection. Phil's on his own. Big Red was such a disappointment. They spend the whole movie trying to find him. It's like Waiting for Godot or, I don't know, other movies where you spend the whole movie trying to find this one person, and then he turns out to be a total jerk. He doesn't want anything to do with Lenny. All he wants is the bike. Were there any performances that you particularly liked in this movie?
I don't think anything really stands out as being a good performance. Everything's adequate.
I like Sherry Bain as Cheryl. I thought she was tough. She kept her emotions in check for the most part, but they came out every once in a while. And you could tell she had a wild side and she had done a lot of things she wasn't proud of, but she was hurting. She was alone. She was an orphan too. And she turned to drugs and she turned to the wrong men to fill up the void in her life. But she was finally getting her life together. And then along comes Phil to kind of put a spanner in the works.
Yeah, I think for a first role in a film, that's a pretty meaty one to take because she gets to show a lot of range.
And she does. I think she was great. I really liked her in this movie. And not because we have the same name. She spells hers wrong.
She spells it right.
She spells hers wrong. It can't be right because it's not French. All right. As we always do in our podcast, we rate the movies. So would you give The Hard Ride an A for awesome, an I for intermediate, or a P for pathetic, Jeff?
When I look at The Hard Ride, what I see is a film that isn't a big investment emotionally speaking. It's a breezy story. There's not really much to it. And so much of it is just bike riding as a music video that it doesn't take a lot of brain power to sit through this one. And I did appreciate that. It's not a great movie, but it's definitely not bad. So this one's going to fall right in the middle for me, and I'm going to give it an intermediate I. What are your thoughts?
I think that's how I felt the first time I watched it. It was kind of a meh movie. It didn't really strike me as being so great. And watching it the second time, I did improve my opinion of the movie. So if I had given it like 2 stars before, 2.5, I would probably go up to 3, 3.5. I don't think that makes it an A movie still. I think it's still lacking a lot just because so much of the movie, nothing's happening. They spend this whole movie looking for this guy to bring him to the funeral, and these other guys fight. And I don't know. It seemed like the story was almost incidental to what's going on between Grady and Red and their beef with each other. And Phil just happens to get in the middle of that because of that stupid bike. So I don't know. It's better than Hell's Bells, which was very similar in theme, where 2 rivals were trying to get the same bike and the same woman. And I didn't like that movie at all. And this was much better. But still, I don't think I can bump it up to an A because of that. However, I would recommend that people watch it because there's a lot of good going on here. So it's an I, but it's an I plus for me.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that people watch this one. And if you're into that kind of music, maybe even listen to the soundtrack.
Well, just watch the movie. You'll get the whole soundtrack. It's a twofer.
So to find out more information about The Hard Ride and other films we've reviewed on the American International Podcast, you can visit our website, AIPpod.com. There you can watch trailers for the movies we've reviewed, also see advertising paraphernalia like posters and lobby cards. You can message us to request movies that you'd like for us to cover, find our social media links, and find a link to our store, where a purchase of some of our merch will help us to keep the website running and the podcast going into the future. Again, that's AIPpod.com.
Well, now I think it's time to shake off the dust of the road and put ourselves away. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.